So the main project I'm working on is a very, very big project called Australian Public Service Reform. So I'm the Deputy for Public Sector Reform at Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And last year in the October budget and around the same time, Minister Gallagher delivered what I think is going to become a really landmark speech outlining the government's very large APS reform agenda. And so there are 4 priorities that the Minister outlined in the government's agenda. The first one is making sure that the public service has integrity in everything that we do. The second one, I think particularly relevant to the topic of the conversations here at the conference today, are around putting people and business at the centre of service design and delivery. The third one is about the Australian Public Service being a model employer. And the fourth priority is about capability and uplifting the capability of the Australian Public Service. So we have not just one project, but at the moment we've got 31 initiatives that have been announced across that whole reform agenda, across those 4 different pillars of the agenda, with 11 different agencies running them. So we're a very small team in Prime Minister and Cabinet, working to support and enable all of these other departments to do great things that align with the outcomes and principles of public sector reform. It's a really interesting question. We've got such a large reform agenda with so many moving parts across an organisation in the Australian Public Service that is 170,000 people strong, with multiple different organisational units, different departments, different agencies within that. One of the things that we're doing is we're looking really strongly at this principle around devolved accountability. We know that a small team in Prime Minister and Cabinet can't affect cultural and mindset change across an organisation as large and complicated as the Australian Public Service. So we're really seeing our job is to make sure that people at every level of the public service have an opportunity to get involved in public service reform, actually understand what does that, how does that relate to my context in terms of what I do in my job, in my agency, and that's all over the country and at all different levels across the service, in many, many different roles, from being a park ranger to being a customer service support officer in a Services Australia office in Liverpool, to helping government with their cabinet submissions for the budget. So really diverse, and we're really looking at devolved accountability where all of those agencies who are delivering APS reform outcomes and initiatives are actually accountable. We have a shared mission. We know what we're trying to achieve, but we give people the freedom to achieve that the way that works best for them. So that's one of our strategies. The other one is around capability, and it's really putting capability at the heart of everything we do in public sector reform, and thinking about, in addition to our capability initiatives that we're delivering for government, if there's a choice of you can deliver something with a capability uplift or without a capability uplift, we say do it with the capability uplift as part of it, because we think that shifting capability and giving people the opportunities to lift their capability will actually then start shifting culture and mindset, which helps us, I guess, continually improve and achieve the reform outcomes that we've been given the opportunity to work on. Well, as I talked about before, there's 4 pillars of the public service reform agenda. I think the really important ones there, going to your question, how do we put people and business at the centre of service design and delivery? And also, how do we make the Australian Public Service a model employer? How do we look at flexible work practices? How do we look at supporting specialist skills within the service? How do we attract and retain specialist skills? The other really important thing that we're working on, I think, is how do we make ourselves as a public service really reflect the communities that we serve when we're working for government and the Australian people. So how do we make sure that we have a real diversity of people that we're attracting into the public service and that we're retaining all of those skill sets. So how do we attract people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds? How do we attract people from First Nations backgrounds? How do we make sure we've got gender balance and diversity in the different work areas for the different things that we do? So we're doing a whole lot of thinking about those things. And also when it comes to putting people and business at the centre, we're really thinking about how do we lift capability to make sure that public servants are really capable and really informed so they can engage very deeply and genuinely with the people and the businesses and communities that we serve. So, as I was saying, we're a very large organisation in the Australian Public Service, 170,000 odd people and multiple different agencies. If you take just one example, if you think about, take for example MyGov as a digital service delivery platform, that's servicing millions of Australians every day are relying on MyGov to access a whole range of different government services, whether it's in health services digitally, whether it's veterans accessing veteran services, whether it's customers of Services Australia for social supports or other types of benefits that are available to all Australians. All of those different member services are kind of joined up and linked in to one platform in the form of Services Australia, and millions of people use it. The thing with MyGov as a platform is while there are a whole lot of different departments that are using that platform to support their service delivery for their ministers in a Westminster system of government, at the back end, it's got to be joined up because people don't divide themselves into this portfolio subject area or this portfolio subject area. People are people, communities are communities. And so really it's how do we do that work at the back end so that when people do enter a digital service delivery platform like MyGov, they're actually feeling like they're being treated as a whole person and that we've worked it out between all of the different departments, Department of Health, Services Australia, Department of Veterans Affairs and so on. We've worked it out in the back end so that that collaboration ensures that people are getting a really seamless service when they use Australian government services. I think it goes a little bit to your last question, what we've just been talking about. But I've just been on a panel with Amanda Catamol, who's from the Digital Health Agency, and she made an excellent point, I think, about we actually have to think differently about how we do government, and in government agencies to put people really at the centre and at the heart of what we do. We've actually got to put it at the centre of everything we think about, put it at the centre of our design, also put it right on the table in our governance structures, or when we're thinking about how we set ourselves up, how we design ourselves, how we think about delivery, reporting, outcomes. So I really love that idea of really hardwiring people right at the centre of what we do. And I think there are some very practical things that agencies like hers are doing right now to think differently and shift our mindset in the way that we think about government service delivery.